So far in my World of Warcraft journey, I have leveled 2 entire characters. My first was of course my warrior Sniff, who was really all about exploring the world and experiencing the game for the first time. However, a couple months back I decided to create another character, and I went with a mage, mainly because it is the polar opposite of a warrior and would allow me to level in the weirdest ways possible. Now, I don't plan to stop making mage videos. Whenever a new farm comes out or I just decide to raid with it for the first time, I'll probably still make a video. But I've decided to take all of the mage videos so far and turn it into one long video. Now if that's not your thing, then please feel free to watch the playlist, which contains all the videos individually and all future videos. And before we get started, I'd like to say that we are getting somewhat close to 5,000 subscribers, so any help is appreciated. It costs you nothing and it means the world to me. Anyway, enough yapping. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. If you have been following my channel over the past 2 months, then you will know that I've been playing through WoW Classic for the first time ever, and well, I just hit level 60 for the first time ever. Now, whilst I am still playing on my main character Sniff, in fact, I would even say that my gear is pretty good, at least for pre-raid gear anyway. Now, whilst I'm waiting for my first ever Classic raid to actually happen next week, I've got a couple of options for videos to make. Either I make a video about me doing 400 battlegrounds in a row, or we start a new character on a new class and experience the world all over again, but from a completely different angle. So I put up a poll last week asking you guys which class I should try next, and I'm going to be totally honest, I had no intention of ever playing a warlock. I kind of just threw it into the mix just because why not, but that left us with rogue, druid, and mage. Now, I really like the PvP style of rogue, and they're also pretty solid when it comes to PvE content as well, but I think it would just be a little too similar to warrior in the sense that it's a melee DPS. Now, a lot of people seem to want to see me play a druid, and I'm totally on board for playing druid. In fact, it was always going to be my second choice of class. However, there is one huge factor that plays into a mage, and that's the gold making potential that mage has. As a warrior main, I don't really have any options when it comes to making gold aside from professions, so that's what I went with. Besides, I really like the utility that mage brings. It seems to be a really unique way to play the game. As for my race, I did do some research, and it seems that gnome is definitely the pick for mages on Alliance. So I picked a human, and this time we went with the female option, since I think Sniff needs a little bit of companionship as he has been pretty lonely recently. Elwyn Forest, an absolute bouquet of smells, the fresh greenage, the trees, and the slight fishiness of the murlocs. Truly a perfect zone for an MMO. I started off by rearranging my UI to how I like, and I've had quite a few people ask me about my UI, and honestly, I try my best to keep it as simple as possible and as close to vanilla as I can without the game being uncomfortable to play. We picked up our first quests. We of course got stuck straight into murdering wolves and kobolds. Now, the first time I did this 2 months ago, there were so many people here that you had to join a 5-man group in order to get a mob tag, and it's worth noting that I started filming this at 5 AM, so we were pretty much uninterrupted, and I gotta say, it was nice, somewhat relaxing even, to just run around slinging spells at mobs. And much easier than warrior, since I don't have to sit and eat something every 5 seconds to regain some health. Once I turned in the first 2 quests, I then went and did basically the same as the last quest, in that we have to kill 10 kobolds, but these are located further up the back of Northshire. Next, we headed up the back to do the bandana quest, which I never actually got to do the first time around, since I just skipped over it because there was just so many people all trying to do it at once. We were then introduced to our class trainer, and we were able to learn Frostbolt and Conjure Water, but for whatever reason, I walked right past Conjure Water, despite the fact that it would have been incredibly useful. We then headed to the back of the zone to take out the kobold laborers, and of course keeping an eye out for any chests that may spawn in there. At level 5, I headed back to the class trainer and actually acquired Conjure Water this time. And lastly, for Northshire, I headed back to the bandits area to complete the quest Millie's Harvest and then kill Garrick for his head. And I then started to make my way out of Northshire and into Goldshire, one of my favourite places in the entire game. Just a perfect little inn and blacksmiths in the middle of the forest. Of course, I gathered every quest I could, starting with more kobold murder in attempt to collect 8 large candles and 10 gold dust. It was also around this point that I decided that I wouldn't log off until I had managed to run the dungeon, the Dead Mines. But I would want to wait until around level 17, so I've got a little ways to go yet. I then quickly stopped by Billy in order to do his nice and simple boar killing quest. I also quickly did the scouting quest. We will forget that that happened. Now after that, I figured we had a little bit of work to do, starting with visiting our class trainer and learning everything we could, and then taking a quick trip to Stormwind, where I picked up 2 professions, herbalism and mining. I also made a stop at the auction house to pick up mage weave bags and a lesser magic wand, before making my way back into Elwyn Forest to continue questing. I made my way to the east of Elwyn to attempt to kill the mini-boss princess. Now, one reason I really wanted to give Mage a try was because of the weird things that Mage can do, like jumping around a fence until you're able to kill it. And that's exactly what I tried doing against Princess, and I gotta say, I felt really cool. I spent the next couple of hours completing all the quests that I could over by the sawmill area, killing wolves, killing bears, collecting wood, and killing murlocs. All perfectly standard Elwyn Forest stuff. Until I eventually made my way over to the west of Elwyn to complete the Hogger kill quest, and I made friends with some random guy who agreed to kill it with me, and we just stood talking in the forest for like an hour. And that to me is what MMOs are all about. Just 2 random dudes having a conversation in the middle of a forest. We were now quite a few hours into my new character, and we had made some very good progress so far. We had gotten 2 professions to level, a wand, a friend, and we were also level 10, meaning I could start to assign my first talent points. Now, I would first start to put points into Fire Mage, at least until I unlocked Blizzard and could start learning how to AoE farm. But now we had done all of the quests available in Elwyn Forest and could now start to think about moving to another zone. So I started journeying west and headed into Westfall. Starting off our journey in Westfall, I of course picked up the quest that are right at the start of the zone and got to work collecting the Ochra, Gore Tusk Snouts, Stringy Vulture Meat, and the Murloc Eyes. And of course I was picking up any oats that I saw along the way. I then started doing the People's Militia quest chain, as that would eventually lead me into getting the Dead Mines quests. I continued running around Westfall for a good few hours, doing basically any quest that I could get my hands on, and got to a point where I really only had 1 quest left to do, and it was just a little bit too high of a level for me, so I decided to find another place to quest for a while, and went with Dunmorrow. Things were pretty low level here, but not low enough to the point where I can't gain XP anymore. But that also meant that I could just blast through any quest here nice and easily. I went and did all of the gnome quests that are just outside of Gnomeregan, went into a cool frozen cave to murder a load of trolls, and even went up a hill to steal a load of weed from some more trolls. Really just a bad day to be a troll, I guess. Everything was going well, but again I quickly ran out of quests to complete, so I started heading up towards the back of Dunmorrow and did the Mange Claw kill quest and started making my way towards Loch Moden. I started doing the small quest chain located just outside of Thelsamar, which was really just run here, kill trogs, turn in quest, go back, kill more trogs, before I eventually made my way into Thelsamar. Look, I know I keep saying this about every place, but this really is one of my favourite locations in WoW. It's just such a cozy place with one of the best building styles in the game. I loaded up my quest log with as many quests as I possibly could and got straight to work. The thing I like about questing here is that all the quests kind of work together. Like I'm heading to one location to do one thing, but oh look, there's a spider I need to tear off its legs and give it to a psychotic dwarf. After tearing things up at the kobold camp, I headed further up the zone, killing boars, bears and spiders as I went, in order to collect a couple more quests, which would send me on a journey into a mine in order to kill even more kobolds and tear off their ears and return them to him. I told you the dwarfs were psychotic. I then finished up by doing the blood sausage kill quest and made my way back into Thelsamar in order to turn in a gazillion quests. Truly one of the greatest feelings in WoW, being able to march back into town and turn in a load of quests. After that, the rest of the quests here were just too high of a level for me, so I went back into Stormwind and started smelting up the ore that I had been passively gathering. And I also made a quick stop at my class trainer in order to update my abilities before I headed back into Westfall, because we were now level 17 and could take on the Dead Mines. Now, I was just so eager to get myself into the dungeon and start grinding out XP and loot that I completely forgot about picking up any quest, and I hadn't even killed the Defias messenger yet. So I let that thought rest in the back of my mind and continued to do the dungeon anyway. We eventually made our way through to the first boss, Rakzor, and I gotta say, it's a little weird being a caster, because the first time I did this, I was obviously a tank, but I kind of like it, being able to bring so much utility to the team. It's also worth noting that this dungeon has quite a few good pieces of gear for me, primarily the Emberstone staff, and the wand would also be a welcomed thing to have, and I suppose the ring as well. Continuing through the dungeon, we made our way to Sneed and took him down, and he dropped a pair of cloth gloves, which I did need on because why not? We then went and started to kill Gilnid, who would have the chance to drop the lavishly jeweled ring, and what do you know? He actually did drop it. And of course we needed on it, and won, which was nice. We then made our way along the wooden platform to kill Mr. Smite, and then up along the ship to kill Captain Greenskin, who would have the chance at dropping the Emberstone staff. But sadly, it didn't drop this time. So whilst we were doing Van Cleef, we ended up just nuking him down and ignoring the ads, and sadly, we died to them after. Sadly though, we never ended up going back to kill Captain Cookie, so we didn't even get a chance to get the wand this time. So we had now done our first dungeon on our new character, and that means I had completed the little goal that I had set for myself. However, we never did any of the quests, and I still really wanted to get my hands on that staff. So I decided to quickly kill the Defias messenger so that I could do the quest and head straight back into the dungeon for another chance at getting my staff. Now, run number 2, I have to apologise because I've lost the footage for it. I have no idea where it went, so I'm sorry. But basically, we got the wand, but we never ended up getting the staff, which is a shame. But we went back for a third run, which was possibly the worst dungeon run I have ever had. The run started just like any other. We cleared our way to Rakzor and got him down no problem, albeit we did take him in a weird location, but no matter. Then we get to Sneed, and well, we take the mech down, and the tank walks right past Sneed himself whilst I'm trying to evade him with the tools that I have. But no matter, that could just be a mistake that anyone could make, right? Then he proceeds to pull the entire of the next room, blame the warrior, and then leaves. Now that's the World of Warcraft experience I was missing. Now, I did try my best to try and teach the warrior how to tank, but I figured he was either brand new to the game or extremely high. So we find another person that isn't even a tank, but is instead a rogue. But we press on anyway, and we eventually get to Mr. Smite, and we do manage to take him down. And then another 30 minutes later, we finally make it to Mr. Greenskin, and we take him down, and the staff drops, and I win the role. So thank God those 2 hours I just spent in the Dead Mines didn't go to waste. Now, one thing that has attracted me to playing Mage is the weird things that it can do. Like when I was just starting out in Elwyn Forest, I used a fence to solo the mini-boss Princess. Now, if I tried that on a warrior, I would indeed get folded in half. Now, mages are pretty notorious for doing some very broken things, and obviously, I want to do that too. I mean, how could I not? So for today, I have set myself the task of learning how to AoE farm in order to grind experience points. Now, AoE farming is where a mage camps a spawn for a load of mobs like gnolls, and then groups them up and uses a combination of abilities like Frost Nova in order to root all of the mobs in place, then backs up a significant amount and used Blizzard to deal massive AoE damage and continuously slow the mobs. Of course, abilities like Cone of Cold, Arcane Explosion, and Flame Strike can all be used pretty effectively as well. But me being a little level 22, the safest way for me to do this would be to simply Frost Nova and then Blizzard. Doesn't sound too hard, right? Is what I thought whilst I was doing my initial research. Logging into this character for the first time in a couple of weeks, we were in Thelsamar, which is relatively convenient since I wanted to head straight to the farming spot, which was located in the wetlands. Luckily, I also know a shortcut down this hill. With that out of the way, I wanted to just get stuck straight into trying it. So I rounded up as many mobs as I could, and we hit them with a good old Frosty Nova, which would immediately be followed up with a sketchy Blizzard, and then blinked away once they got too close. So far so good, I suppose. Then we hit them with another Frost Nova to root them again, but one of them resisted it, so I did what any good player would do and ran away. Okay, so my first attempt could have gone better, but trying to analyze what went wrong, apart from the fact that one of them resisted the Frost Nova, I ran out of mana too quickly. So I thought that trying not to use Blink as much would help me out. Now, going into my second attempt, my pool looked like this, which is clearly too spread out. Somehow though, it looked like it was all going to turn out okay. That was until I pulled a random slime behind me. Now, my third attempt, I actually was successful, and I'm thinking that was only because there was just 3 mobs, but still. However, I still wasn't able to kill them all without having to clean them up with my wand. Attempt number 4 didn't quite go to plan. Attempt number 5 also didn't go to plan, and I realized that if a mob resisted Frost Nova, it would probably be best if I just left and reset them. Attempt 6 was like my first step of refining my strategy. In order for me to fully utilize my mana and actually be able to kill the mobs in a timely manner, I would want to Frost Nova and get as far away as I possibly can before using Blizzard, and then ride out the Blizzard as long as possible, even if the placement wasn't perfect, which meant that I could actually use a second Blizzard before the mobs would get too close. On the next pull, I then realized that after using 2 full Blizzards, my Frost Nova would actually be off cooldown again, meaning I can root them again and then get to maximum range and use another Blizzard, which would usually kill all the mobs or leave them at low enough health so that I could kill them with a single use of my wand or fire blast. On the next attempt, I went back to my original farming spot since the mobs had respawned, and this time I really tried my best to group the mobs as tightly as I possibly could before using Frost Nova and getting as much distance as possible and sending 2 Blizzards to their face, then using Frost Nova and then one last Blizzard, and this was the perfect strategy for my level. Nova, Blizzard, Blizzard, Nova, Blizzard. So I did this for the next couple of hours, which got me all the way to level 23. But that was all the time that I had left to play, and I thought that was a pretty good point to log out at. But then I never logged back in. In fact, this character hasn't moved since I recorded this video. It's actually now just my bank alt, forever sitting in Stormwind, collecting mail and shipping items. But why? It was all going so well. And well, that's because I created another account, Fart and Smell. And that's because there are just so many uses for a second account that I thought if I was going to level another character, I might as well do it on a different account. So I have spent the last few weeks slowly leveling and boosting this character to level 30. And now I can finally continue my mage journey, pretty much where I left off, but this time we will be going to Duskwood to relearn how to AoE farm. This time it will be more difficult though. More mobs, casters, patrolling mobs, but it will be a good learning curve for the future. So Duskwood has quite a lot of farming spots, really anywhere in this general location. But that also meant that there were going to be quite a lot of competition from other mages. But not just mages, since there was a couple of quests that involved players to come to this exact location and kill mobs. Luckily for me, I was playing at 5 AM like any normal member of society. So I decided to start off with this pack right here. And this is a nice and easy one to do since it was only about 4 mobs that were already close together. And using these same strategy as before, Nova, Blizzard, Blizzard, Nova, Blizzard, we were able to do this one very easily. Now since I was now level 30, I actually had enough mana that I could add a blink into my rotation, so it would now be Nova, Blink, Blizzard, Blizzard, Nova, Blizzard. Coming down to this spot here, which is literally just around the corner from the last spot, there is an absolute load of mobs to farm, and they respawned relatively quickly, but more often than not, there was also a little chest here to loot. And I can't lie, AoEing down this many mobs is so satisfying. Something only a warrior can dream of. And clearing this area took about 5 minutes each, since I would kinda stretch it into 3 different packs of mobs. Although I'm sure if you are anyone who isn't me, you'd probably be more than capable of clearing this entire area in one pool. And the good thing about this spot is that sometimes the mobs would just immediately respawn, and if they didn't, then I could just go back to the other spot around the corner quickly, and that would offer me a constant stream of experience points. So much XP in fact, that each level was only taking about an hour and a half. So I continued farming for a while, running back and forth from these 2 spots, when I realized that there was an entirely different spot right behind me the entire time. A spot with probably even more mobs than any of the other spots. I mean, look at that. That's like 10 mobs in one pool. And man, those numbers. And luckily enough, this spot seems to have the same thing as the last one, where sometimes the mobs just immediately respawn, and if they didn't, sometimes I would just quickly switch to another layer and I would have a pile of new Blizzard victims. So I did this all the way up until level 33. And you know, I was getting bored of the same mobs, the same zone, the same route, so I decided to go to another higher level spot. Welcome to Arathi, an absolutely beautiful zone of grass, hills, random elemental thingies, and the best mage AoE farming spot in the game. At least that's what I was told anyway. This is a very popular alliance-only farm, with loads and loads of orc peons, and we will most definitely be seeing other mages here. Luckily for me, it was 5 AM the next day, so I hopped on the next griffin to Arathi and got stuck straight into farming. I'm somewhat nervous trying out a new spot for the first time since I don't really know how to pull each pack of mobs, and how many mobs is too many. So it really is just a case of trial and error. So I decided to try out the field on the right side first since it looked to be more isolated than the other one. Now one thing I noticed almost immediately is that they were harder to kill, and that was probably due to them being a higher level than the Duskwood werewolf things. So my rotation has now evolved into Nova, Blink, Blizzard, Blizzard, Nova, Blizzard, Blizzard. Basically just an extra Blizzard to compensate for the extra health points. The only thing I really don't like about this farming spot is that there are these random orc grunts that are roaming around the outside of the field, and occasionally you would run into them or they would respawn on top of you, and obviously that messes up your entire pool. But overall, this farm worked wonders. The amount of XP that I was getting from doing this was insane, especially since I was uncontested at this time in the morning. So I farmed here for about 4 hours until I hit level 35, and then we made a quick trip back to Stormwind so that I could repair all of my poor gear. And then I bought some consumables that might come in handy for AoE farming later. But then I had an idea. You know me, I have the attention span of a small duck, and I wanted a bit of a change. So I headed over to Scarlet Monastery to get in a few graveyard runs and library runs, because I wanted to maybe see if we could get a spell cleave group together, since I hadn't experienced that yet. And besides, there are quite a few nice pieces of gear that I could potentially pick up. I started off with a graveyard run, since I had never actually done it before, and I thought that it would be worth it just to experience it. And you know, it was a lot different than what I was expecting. When I think of Scarlet Monastery, I usually think of these big grand halls filled to the brim with mobs, but this one was a lot different. It's very dark and has a gloomy vibe to it, and we were mostly killing spirits and ghouls. And I guess we were a spell cleave group, but it's not really what I was hoping for. I guess I'll just have to wait until I could go and do Armory and Cathedral, where the real numbers come out. I'm talking 1 healer, 4 mages, pulling the entire dungeon. That's what I'm looking forward to. Now, Graveyard only has 1 boss, and he's a pretty cool looking guy. He's a big spooky skeleton. He doesn't have anything that I'm interested in loot wise, but I still think it was worth it for the experience. Moving on to Library. Now, I was a lot more excited for this dungeon because, well, it would get me more XP, but also because there are a couple of different loot pieces that would be very nice to get. The Illusionary Rod and the Mantle of Dome. There is a chest piece, but I don't really care about that since the one I currently have is better. The dungeon starts basically the same as all of the other Scarlet Monastery dungeons in a large hallway. We then clear our way into a nice large courtyard area and clear all the mobs there. We then go and take down the boss that I have never seen before, Houndmaster Loxy, who dropped the dog training gloves. And that got me thinking a bit. Would it be possible to make an entire set with the sole purpose of murdering beasts? I mean, you could have this thing, but you could also have, like, the collar from Halcyon in Lower Blackrock Spire. We continue through the Scarlet Halls and eventually make it to what I assume is the library part of the dungeon, before we then make it to the last boss, Arcanist Dome. And he does actually have a mechanic, very rare for Classic WoW, and it's just a simple LOS mechanic. He will cast Detonation, and you've simply just got to hide from him. And he dropped both the staff and the shoulders, and I won on both of these items. Very epic. 2 pretty big upgrades for me. One thing that has really attracted me to playing a mage is the weird and slightly ridiculous things that it can do, like leveling entirely through AoE farming or using a fence to kill a high level mob. Last time I learned the very basics of AoE farming, and I think I got it down pretty good, but today I want to take that just another step further and take on my hardest mage challenge yet, and that would be the Zul'Farrak solo XP farm. Should I be successful, this farm will grant me a boatload of XP and gold, but I'm not sure a new player like myself is ready for such a high level farm. In order for me to be able to run this Zul'Farrak farm, I have been advised to wait until level 42, and I was currently level 40, so I decided that it was time to run some Scarlet Cathedral, since last time the spell cleave group for Graveyard wasn't quite what I was looking for, but I know for a fact that Cathedral spell cleave can get pretty crazy. We enter into the first courtyard area of the dungeon, and I offered to pull the right side of the room, and one of the other mages would pull the left side. Then we would meet in the middle, and both of us would ice block. All was well, but the other mage used a premature blizzard, which caused the caster mobs to freak out. So we had to back up and LOS, and with a bit of patience and a hell of a lot of wanding, we did manage to clean up all of the mobs. For the second room, my ice block was obviously on cooldown, so 2 of the other mages pulled the room. And this time the mobs were actually in a pretty good position, and we began to pelt them to death with Blizzard. Since I had aggro, I quickly hit the mobs with a Frost Nova and LOS'd them, and the team were able to clean them up pretty nicely. And now for the last part, the biggest pool of the entire dungeon. Now usually you would clear the entire cathedral before even touching the boss, because normally if you tag the boss before clearing everything, all of the remaining mobs would start sprinting towards you, and on the regular, that would be a pretty bad situation. But for 4 mages and a priest, it's an absolute dream. Holy crap. Oh my god. What the f- What the hell, dude? That is insane! What? Oh my god. That is crazy. A couple of mages can do that? Afterwards, I decided to take a little trip back to Stormwind for a couple of different reasons. First of all, so that I could update all of my abilities for the first time since like level 30, but also to pick up my first mount on this character. So I headed out of the gates of Stormwind and started making my way towards the lumberyard, where I could both learn my riding skill and purchase my mount. Well, thank God I don't have to travel like that anymore. Since my horse on my main character was the Black Stallion, I thought it would be nice to get a different one this time, and I went with the Chestnut Mare. Afterwards, me and my newly acquired mount, which still needs a name by the way, headed back to Scarlet Monastery. And since it was quite late now, I struggled to find a Spellcleave group for Cathedral. In fact, I couldn't even find a Cathedral group in general, so I had to settle for a couple of normal armory runs, which I had done a gazillion times before on my warrior. But you know, it was quite nice actually, remembering all of the good times way back when last month. Those were the days, man. We quickly made our way to Herod after pulling 2 mobs at a time for half an hour, and luckily for the paladin, a nice Ravager dropped for him. I did try my best to find a Cathedral group, but I had no luck. And I guess that was understandable since it was 1:30 AM on a Wednesday and all of the normal people had went to sleep. So I once again settled for an armory run. No spicy loot this time though. And then I made the responsible decision to actually log off for the night. I logged on the next day with only a couple of hours of sleep because I have a crippling addiction to World of Warcraft. Since it was now early, there wasn't too many people online yet, and I settled for a Cathedral group of 2 mages and a warlock that was 2 light years away from the dungeon. Please, someone tell me why people queue for Scarlet Monastery if they are all the way in Booty Bay. It happens every time, and why? Since this wasn't a Giga Chad Spellcleave group, the pools obviously weren't as big as before, but it was still technically a Spellcleave group, and we were still pulling relatively large pools, but nothing compared to what it was like yesterday. Halfway through the dungeon, we managed to ding level 41, which is always great, and we did attempt to pull the entire cathedral, but yeah, so we had to stick to just clearing it normally. How boring. So now that we were level 41 and still had an entire level until I could start farming Zul'Farrak, I decided a little change of scenery would be nice and decided to head over to Razor Fen Downs, since there would be quite a few nice pieces of loot to get from here, like the Death Mage Sash, the Robes of the Lich, and maybe even the Plague Rot Sprig. The only issue I had is that there were no flight paths in Kalimdor, and I thought it would be good to just get them all done and out of the way. I patiently waited for everyone to arrive for almost a whole hour, with my quest log absolutely filled and ready. Once everyone was finally here, we got started straight away, clearing our way through the winding halls of this overly complicated dungeon towards the first boss, Cache, who we completely skipped and went straight to Mordresh the Fire Eye. I don't really know why, but whatever. Mordresh has the chance to drop the Death Mage sash belt piece, which would be quite nice actually, since I was yet to find a good waist piece. I also happened to die due to using Arcane Explosion a little too close, and in my defense, I thought the little calcium men had way less health than they actually do. Also, no belt, just the boss's skull. And then we went back to Cache. I still don't know why we didn't just do it initially. Luckily for the tank, he did get his lovely chest piece though. We continue to make our way through the dungeon and take down a Glutton, who doesn't carry any loot that I care about, but he also didn't drop the only piece of loot that's worth anything. We press on, making our way up the tall, spiraling rock in the center until we eventually reach the final boss, Amnanar, who unfortunately didn't drop the robe we were after, but a relatively useful pair of gloves dropped, so I snapped those anyway. So I now had a Razorfen Downs run under my belt, but we were still a little bit away from level 42, and I still really wanted to get that robe, so I headed back into the dungeon for another run, which I of course forgot to hit record on, well at least for the first boss anyway, but we started on a part that we didn't do on the first run, the escort quest, and it is a pretty typical escort quest. We escort a guy to this altar thingy, and we protect him as he channels some sort of ability. We clear wave after wave of mobs until eventually the boss Plague Maw the Rotting spawns, and he has the chance to drop the Plague Rot Sprig wand. And what do you know, it actually did. Not a massive upgrade by any means, but I'll take it regardless. After that, we continue the dungeon like normal, killing Mordresh, but being responsible when killing the skeletons this time, killing Glutton, and then finally Amnanar, who did drop the robe we wanted, and wow, that's purple. So obviously 2 runs of Razorfen Downs isn't going to give me enough XP to level up. So what did I do to get the remaining amount of XP? Well, I did a little bit of AoE farming, and then I paid for a boost that I didn't record out of pure shame, which means it was time to take on Zul'Farrak. As eager as ever, I made my way over to Tanaris and set my Hearthstone in Gadgetsan, and then quickly made my way over to the dungeon. Now, I had done a solid amount of research. I had all the consumables I needed, and I knew all the safe spots, so I was feeling pretty confident. So I mounted up and began running towards the farming spot. I pulled mob after mob, and was only a few feet away from the first safe spot, but died. Now, I just thought that maybe I did something wrong, and I wanted to give it another go, so I applied my shields and started running. This time, not making it as far as the last. I just thought that maybe I was too low level, or maybe the strategy I was using was flawed. So I went back to researching and watching videos when I came across a video, a great video by the way, which talks about using invisibility potions to skip a significant amount of the mobs, which was a bit different than all of the other videos I had watched, but I just thought, what could the harm be, right? So I quickly grabbed some potions and got started. We first used this lesser invisibility potion to skip these first pack of mobs, which can later be done by just being a higher level. Then we scale up this wall, as you do, and then jump down and mount, and then run over to this other wall, which is also a safe spot. We then pop a regular invisibility potion and run as far as we can before it runs out. We continue to run, popping every shield and piece of utility we possibly can, but eventually we did die, because for some reason I didn't use Ice Barrier. But that was the furthest we had gotten so far. I mean, the farming spot was right there, so I reset and tried again. This time I actually used Blink in a responsible place instead of sending myself straight into a wall, which proved to be a big reason as to why my last attempt failed. Once we made it to Theka, I kinda thought thought that this would be the end of the run since he dazed me, but with a Frost Nova and a well-timed blink, we were able to get into the farming spot and reset the mobs. And now that we had learned how to actually get to the farming spot, we now had to learn how to do the actual farm. So I popped both Mana Shield and Ice Barrier and activated the boss. Then started opening up all of the graves on the right side, and luckily there is another reset spot right behind this pot, which is very convenient. Almost too convenient, you know? We then run up the other side and do the same thing before resetting once again in this same spot. And then for the last time, we open up these graves that are tucked away in the corner. And that was it. We had done it. Everything was set, and I was so excited to finally get the chance at completing the farm. So I began the pull with a rank 1 Flame Strike as the video instructed me to do, used my wand to aggro the boss, and got stuck. Feeling frustrated with myself, I obviously thought that that was enough World of Warcraft for the day. Logging on the next day after a reasonable amount of sleep, I was feeling refreshed and ready to grind out Zul'Farrak. And using the exact same strategy as yesterday, we had seemingly mastered the art of actually getting to the farming spot. But obviously, we were yet to actually complete a run. And well, there's really only one way to learn, so I began popping all of the graves. And once everything was ready, I once again opened with a Flame Strike and wanding the boss, and this time obviously trying not to get stuck. And now all I had to do was jump back and forth across these two walls until the mobs were nicely grouped together. And the way I did this was by first using a rank 1 blizzard in order to make sure all the mobs were slowed and stacked together, and then sending in a rank 3 blizzard, or maybe rank 4, whatever it was that I had at the time, and then it was just rinse and repeat. And really only about 5 minutes later, the mobs began to start dying. And pay attention to my XP bar, because the amount of XP we get is crazy. How insane is that? Level 42, and we just got half a level in under 20 minutes. On my warrior, each level was taking maybe a minimum of 4 hours, so being able to do it in 30 minutes on a mage is just crazy to me. And you know, the weird thing is, even after struggling so much to learn this farm, after I had done it once, I really had no issue at all. Well, apart from the occasional death here and there, which I think is expected, especially considering that it's me that's doing it. But over the next 2 days, I would do basically nothing but farm this dungeon over and over and over again. And we got all the way to level 54 in what felt like record time. And that's when I learned about another farm, one that might be even more insane than this one. Since starting my mage character, I've mainly focused on learning how to control mobs properly. Learning AoE farming was the first step, and last time I took on my hardest World of Warcraft Classic challenge yet, the Zul'Farrak Graveyard Farm, which is completely different from anything I had done in World of Warcraft before. And although it did take me a couple hours to get used to it, we still managed to master this farm, I think. And the rewards for doing so were absolutely crazy, racking up over 400 gold and skyrocketing my XP, making me go from level 42 all the way to 54 in the span of 2 days. And towards the end of my farming spree, people kept telling me, just wait until you're able to do the Sunken Temple farm. But I can't imagine a farm being more crazy for XP than this one, right? So let's find out. Starting off the day, we could actually go straight to Sunken Temple and start grinding. However, I've been using the same crappy gear for a while now, so I wanted to see if I could maybe get some upgrades by doing a Black Rock Depths run. So I started running around, gathering all the quests that I possibly could, and that got me thinking a little bit. I actually haven't done a single quest on this character since level 10, and it did take a little while, but we eventually found a group for a a full Blackrock Depths run. Now normally when you do Blackrock Depths, it's just arena and anger runs, so it's nice to actually get to explore the rest of the dungeon every now and then. We start by clearing out a nice chunk of the center area and move down one of the many hallways to kill the first boss, who dropped the Sprite Caster Cape, which would actually be a very nice upgrade for me. We then make our way down this back part, which I've never seen before, to kill a boss that I didn't even know existed. And I also didn't have the kill quest for him, which is a shame, but whatever. We then headed to do the best part of the entire dungeon, the Ring of Law, or Arena as it's affectionately known. Something about the rush of this part is amazing, eagerly staring at that gate waiting to see if the boss you want is going to spawn. For us, we want Okthor the Breaker, because he can drop the Banthok Sash, one of the best pieces of gear I could possibly get. A reasonable amount of stamina and intellect, increased chance to hit with spells, and increasing spell power. What is there not to like about this piece of gear? Unfortunately though, we got Anub Shia, so maybe we come back later and try to farm it out. Skipping over Anger for now, we headed down the back side of Arena to kill Pyromancer Loregrain, who actually can drop a pretty nice staff, but you know how my loot luck goes. Next we head on over to Warder Stilgus, and he's a pretty interesting one because of the shoulders that he can drop. They are by no means pre-bis like the Banthok Sash, but getting this would be absolutely huge, especially for the farm that we are about to do. And luckily for me, we actually do get it, which is massive. Sadly though, we didn't have enough keys to open up the coffers and awaken the golems, so we had to skip that part. We then head deeper into Blackrock Depths, killing a lot of golems as we go to kill Phineas Darkfire, dropping a very nice leg piece that the healer didn't need. We then kill Lord Incendius, and normally when I've done full Blackrock Depths runs, this is where we would finish. But then I remembered we haven't even done Anger or Golem yet, so we head over there to kill Anger. And although I don't need Hand of Justice, I still hope it drops for whoever does need it. We then carefully clear the next room and eventually get to Golem. Now Golem can drop the Omnicast boots, a very good pair of boots for us, and again, we do actually get it. Now at this point I was thinking we were definitely done now. I mean, there's no other part to this dungeon, right? And that's when we started going down a hallway that I didn't even know existed into a room that I didn't know existed. So the entire time I've been farming Blackrock Depths on my warrior, there was an entire section of the dungeon that I didn't even know about. I swear, right when you think you know everything, this game comes in with something new every time. This was a pretty strange area though. It was like a dark iron dwarf bar with loads of drunk dark iron dwarves. We then headed down into this scary looking room to kill a small fire boss that spawns loads of these tiny little elementals. And of course it was my job to take care of those. We take him down and continue moving on, and we get to what I believe is called the Trial of the Seven or something very similar to that. And this is where I start to kind of remember doing this dungeon in retail. I still can't put my finger on it. Either it was just whilst leveling or something else, I'm not sure. We then headed to the entrance of Molten Core to do the attunement quest, because when this group said that they were going to do everything in the dungeon, they meant it. And it's a real shame that I never picked up the attunement to the core quest. We once again headed into an unfamiliar room, but I'm still not entirely sure what the deal was with this room. There was loads of these tiny mobs and we had to unlock a door or something, and every time I tried to sit and have a drink, mobs would spawn on top of me. We then take on the second to last boss of the dungeon, Magmus. Really, he's just some big magma guy, but across the entire room there were loads of these little smaller golems spraying fire everywhere, which I just thought was pretty cool. Then finally we made it to the last boss, Emperor Dagrand Thorisan, and you know what, I've definitely heard this name before. But we take him down pretty easily, and he dropped a nice robe for us, which is pretty cool. And with that, we had officially completed a full Blackrock Depths run, and it only took us an entire 2 hours. But you know, I think it was worth it for the experience. Plus, we got 4 pieces of pretty insane loot. Like, we really got gooped up this run. And you know, I think this might just be enough to take on Sunken Temple. I flew over to the Blasted Lands and eagerly made the long swim towards Sunken Temple. And you know, I thought getting into the dungeon would actually be a challenge in itself, but it was actually okay and we got in no problem. So I have done a solid amount of research on this farm, but really I was just needing to get a general idea of how the farm worked and the route, because usually with these types of things I end up finding my own weird way of doing it. So I start my first attempt by running through all of the mobs like I'm supposed to and jumping off of this balcony. And then we do what I think is called a clip jump, where you jump up onto, well, nothing, and as long as you aren't moving, then you can jump up onto the thing that you're hanging off of. And we will be using this a lot throughout the farm. And doing this is also a reset spot. We then follow along the wall until the very end where the 2 green dragon bosses are, and we aggro both of them and drag them to the main boss, Shade of Aranicus. And once you take damage on top of him, you will activate him and he will then call every single dragon in the dungeon to his position, and the 2 green dragons will drop aggro. At least that's what I thought. So I made the death run back and began my second attempt. Now usually when I'm learning some weird shenanigans, I can analyze what went wrong and try to improve or fix whatever issue I have, but I literally had no idea because I thought that I did it right. So really the only thing I could do was give it another go. So I once again aggroed the green dragons and dragged them on top of Aranicus and activated him. Only this time they actually did drop aggro like they're supposed to. So what went wrong on the first attempt? I really don't know. So now we actually get a little bit of downtime to drink and buff up whilst we wait for the dragons to stack nicely. We then aggro everything with a rank 1 blizzard and almost immediately start getting swarmed by mobs. So I blink away and get an ice barrier up whilst I run to the kill spot. Once we're there, we once again use a clip jump to get on top of this side bit. Now the mobs will actually still hit us here, so we need to ice block whilst we wait for them to pass us. So the way this will work is that we will drop down from this ledge and the mobs will start to run back towards me, and I started with a rank 1 blizzard just to group them up. Now unlike the Zul'Farrak farm I did last week, this farm has a lot of casters and that will constantly be firing poison at me, and I actually almost died on the first blizzard, so that was kind of the first major thing I learned. Always keep ice barrier up, no matter what. So I continued jumping up and down from this ledge for a solid 5 to 10 minutes before the mob started to die, and they awarded me with a very reasonable amount of XP, bringing me up to level 55. Now managing to do it on my second try, I just thought that this was going to be the easiest thing ever. Oh, how I could not have been more wrong. My next attempt, I did exactly the same as the last, and I even tried to group the mobs up early by sending a rank 1 blizzard whilst running to the kill spot. Learned pretty quickly not to do that. My fourth attempt, the dragons once again really didn't want to leave me alone. On my fifth attempt, we were actually successful, imagine that. And by that point, my gear was pretty messed up, so I headed back into Stoneman to repair, and I even bought myself a nice little ring that would simply give me an extra 18 nature resistance, which would help in dealing with the casters. I headed back into Sunken Temple, and holding a blizzard for too long resulted in almost instant death, so yeah, don't do that. I'm not even sure what caused this situation. Come around the 10th attempt or so, I forgot about my first rule of keeping ice barrier up at all times, which once again resulted in almost instant death. I continued trying for another hour or so, but there comes a point where your own stupidity becomes too much for even yourself to take, so I just thought that I would try again tomorrow. Logging on the next day, feeling refreshed and ready, I jumped straight into my first attempt of the day, and using the exact same strategy as before, our first run was actually a successful one, a good omen for what is about to come, mostly. Second run went even better than the last one, and we were almost halfway through level 55 already, and I even managed to do it for a third time in a row. And then the next hour or so would be filled with some good runs, but also also a few deaths, like when I was distracted by whatever was on my other monitor and ended up getting slammed by the mobs through the wall, which honestly serves me right for being distracted, and dying because of holding blizzards for too long. Really just stupid things like that. A couple more hours of practice and we seemingly had the farm on lock, probably because as we level up it gets easier and easier, but I eventually started taking my time and actually thinking my plays through instead of rushing and going as quickly as I possibly can. Now the XP in general wasn't too crazy, neither was the gold, but towards the higher end of the 50s, level 59, 58, we were getting around 2 bars of XP per run, which isn't too bad considering we were able to clear it in about 10 minutes, and each level was taking just over 2 hours, which I suppose is crazy. I mean, on my warrior, level 59 to 60 took me 13 hours, so being able to level up in just a couple is just mind-blowing. So I continued to run the dungeon for the entire day, and eventually we got to level 60, and I can officially say that I have successfully leveled 2 entire characters in World of Warcraft Classic for the first time. Okay, so this part basically has nothing to do with the video itself, but I just had to show you this anyway. Obviously, after hitting level 60, I started to get some gear for my character, and decided to start with 5 quick arena runs to try and get the Banthok sash that I mentioned earlier. Run number 1, we got nothing. Run number 2, we got nothing. But on run number 3, we got nothing. Now on the 4th run, a certain orc decided to make an appearance. Are you kidding me? It takes me 150 runs to get Savage Gladiator Chain on my warrior, but I see it on my 4th run on my mage. But that was made up for, because on run number 5, we once again saw Orc Thor, and he did drop his Banthok sash for us. Honestly, an insane first 5 arena runs. Starting the day off, we are actually going back to when I was a fresh level 60. We are currently inside of the Skullman's dungeon trying to get some gear. Now, since we are trying to gear up for a farm, we're actually going to be farming gear that is slightly different. Usually, if I was going to be taking my mage into raids and stuff, I would be farming out gear like the Banthok sash, or Briarwood Reed, or Robe of the Archmage. But all we are actually wanting is intellect and stamina, basically to get as much health and as much mana as humanly possible. And we are also going to want about 60 nature protection, obviously for the imps. And that's why we're inside of Skullman's, trying to get pieces of the Necropile set, because not only does it provide some fantastic stats, but the set bonus would be huge as well, giving defense and intellect, but more importantly, giving 15 resistance to all resistances, which is obviously quite a nice chunk of what we need. Now, luckily for us, any of these pieces of gear can drop from 6 different bosses located inside of the dungeon. The first being Lorekeeper Paul Kelt, who did not drop what we wanted. The second is Dr. Theolin Krastonov, who dropped us a plate waist. The third is Instructor Milicia, who dropped a leather waist piece this time. Fourth is the Ravenian, he dropped the Hammer of the Vesper. Fifth is Lord Alexei Barov, once again not dropping any of the pieces we needed. And lastly, of course, is Lady Lucia Barov, who dropped the same waist as before. So we didn't get anything we were after this time around, but we of course went and took down the final boss of the dungeon, Dark Master Gandling, and he dropped the Devout Crown. Now, it's not what we are after, but it would certainly be a pretty good placeholder item for us. And after this dungeon, I went to the auction house because I decided to splurge a little bit and purchase the best weapon for us, the glowing Brightwood Staff, which gives 15 stamina, 29 intellect, and probably the most important, 15 nature resistance. So the reason I decided to buy and equip this now is because of the conversation I had with my friend Lev off camera, basically saying that I should just give the farm a go, see what happens, see if I like it. I mean, what's the harm in that, right? So I teleported myself to Darnassus and began making the journey towards Desolus. Okay, so believe it or not, I have actually done my research, and I think I know pretty well how the farm generally works. Of course, as I do it more, I remember what abilities to use on what packs. Also, for my first attempts, I'm starting with the 200 mob pool, just so I can get a feel for the run and start to learn the kill phase, which is going to be the hardest part. Now, my first hiccup was this part here, where I get hit way too many times, and I know that doesn't look like a lot of health, but once I get to this point during the 350 mob pool, there's going to be over 100 mobs trailing behind me, which means I probably would have died here. As I continued to pull the rest of the mobs, things were going fine up until this point where I had no ice barrier, I had lost a ton of health, and the mobs were right up my ass. But I continued anyway, and then I tried to do a wide turn to group the mobs without having a blink available. Absolute idiot, which of course resulted in immediate death. My second run, we actually get past where I died last time, and I run into this little side room to pick up some extra mobs. Yeah, I have no idea what I was doing there. On my third run, I had seemingly gotten a little better until I decided to run into the exact same room and do the exact same thing again, because apparently learning from your mistakes is hard for me. On my fourth try, I actually decided to skip that little room, and would you believe, we actually got further this time. Although I almost died here, but a quick health potion sorted that out. I then loop around at the purple entrance and get absolutely clattered through the floor, but when I drop down here, I again don't know what I was trying to do. Fifth run, I ended up doing basically the exact same thing. Run number 6, I decided to do a much larger loop around, which obviously allowed me to survive. And we actually do get to the start of the kill phase. I start using Blizzard to kill and group them, but somehow one mob gets through and I end up dying. Run 7, I once again actually get to the kill phase, but ended up panicking a bit, which obviously killed me. The 8th run actually was going pretty well, but I ended up having the same issue as the last, where the mobs somehow got split up and I was pretty much trapped between them. Now run number 9 was the best run yet. I managed to keep all the mobs nice and slowed together, and I managed to take down most of the imps whilst keeping some of them alive to generate me mana. And I actually kept my shield up for most of it, which is very surprising for me. And after a couple minutes, we had managed to do it. Our first 200 mob Marauding pool. Well, it was 137, but I was happy with that, since it gave me the confidence and the reassurance that this was a real possibility for me. But I decided that before I even attempted doing the 350 mob pool, I wanted to make sure that I was well equipped. So I quickly looted every mob and made my way back over to Scholarman's to have another go at the Necropile set. Whilst I was just farming out gear, I decided that it would be fun to spec into fire, and I actually really liked it. In AoE, it's like playing a living bomb. We first take down Kirtonos the Herald, before clearing our way forward and taking on Rattlegore. We then move on to taking out Raz Frostwhisper, who did not drop any of the mage items. Now this is just peak mage gameplay. We were then on to the first of the 6 bosses that could drop our beloved Necropile gear. Can't lie, getting a little tired of seeing this belt. The second boss only dropped these same boots as before. We then moved on to Instructor Malicia, who did drop an intellect ring, but we don't need that since I've already got plans for my rings. Lady Barov only dropped some leather legs. The 5th boss was unfortunately just a bow, and lastly, the Ravenian, and he did actually drop the Necropile cuffs, and I was rolling against 2 other people, but luckily I won it. Now, obviously, I returned to Skolo again for another run. We did basically the exact same things as the last run, taking out Kirtonos first, followed by Rattlegore, and then Raz Frostwhisper. Peak mage gameplay, then on to the first of the 6, Dr. Theolan Krastonov, who does drop the Necropile shoulders, and we're rolling against no one else, so we do win it. We then move on to Malicia, who give us nothing, and then on to Lady Lady Barov, who also dropped a piece of the Necropile set, and it was the boots. And once again, we do win it. Lord Barov didn't drop anything we needed, and neither did the Revenian. And unfortunately, neither did Dark Master Gandling. So 3 of the 5 pieces, definitely not too bad. And that's when I decided to do some research into the other pieces of mage gear that we could use to fill some of the gaps. And that's when I remembered something. PvP gear. And if we're comparing the Necropile set to the rank 10 PvP set, they're almost the same. But the PvP set would give us some more crit, more spell damage, reduced blink cooldown, and an additional 20 stamina. And I mean, sure, we're sacrificing a little bit of resistance, but there are a lot of other options for that, to be honest. And that was the reason this video took so long to make, because I spent the next 3 weeks farming out Alterac Valley in order to get rank 10. And once the week rolled around that I could actually buy my PvP set, we were pretty much ready. Obviously, I had my entire set, plus I picked up the Stormpike neck and Sergeant's cape, the Dreadmist belt from the auction house. I also had my ring left over from when I did Sunken Temple, just for a little bit of extra nature resistance, and I also got Blood of the Martyr from a Stratholme quest off camera. And finally, I grabbed 2 life stones from the auction house just to regenerate some health passively, and it would also serve as a little panic button. Now, whilst having an intellect buff up, that gave me 3,780 health and 5,733 mana, plus 63 nature resistance so long as I had mage armor on, which should be more than enough for an idiot like me to at least have a solid attempt at completing the run. So all that was left to do now was to wait until I had time to record the video. And that time would come quite randomly. It was late at night and I was recording my next druid video. And on my other monitor, I was watching this video about doing the Mara run naked. And I guess that kind of inspired me, because I randomly decided to do a couple of runs. Now, since the video I watched seemed to be quite a smooth run, especially for being naked, I decided to copy the same route that they used. Now, since I'm now on the 320 to 350 mob pool, we do start in a completely different location than the 200 pool, and we begin by pulling both this Hydra and this Rock Patrol. So whilst I'm showing you the first steps of the mob pulling, I'd like to quickly talk about the consumables I was using. Firstly, I went out of my way and I learned engineering so that I could get a hold of some iron grenades, because the range on these things is absolutely insane and would allow for some much easier mob pulling. They're also very cheap. We're also using nature protection potions, because even though we should have enough resistance, there's still a chance that the imps will break through my ice barrier and start cutting my blizzard short. And with the nature protection potions, it's very unlikely that this will happen. We're also using swiftness potions, and I mean, this is a pretty self-explanatory one. If the mobs get too close or we mess up a part of the pool, we can quickly pop one of these to get our distance again. But later on, I actually do find the perfect use for these. And lastly, magic resistance potions. Now, I'm using this one a lot less, and it's really only for if we're in the kill phase and we have a potion cooldown ready, but we already have a nature protection potion active. Okay, so basically everything up until this point is pretty normal. We're literally just fire blasting and counterspelling everything until we get to here. Now, the way we've got to do this is we have to quickly counterspell the Dimetrodon and then blink into this corner and drop down before any of the previously pulled Dimetrodons silence me. But this run, I thought it would be easier to just use Blizzard instead, which very obviously was not the best idea. Now, once we're down here, this is a great chance to replenish our health with a bandage, but it's basically the only chance we have to pop evocation. We then use a rank 1 Blizzard to start grouping up the mobs a bit before blinking away again. We then have to run through the room that is full of water. Now, at the time, I was trying to avoid the Hydras since I was still new to this, and they do an absolute crap ton of damage. And not long after, we get to a pretty familiar location, and this is where we start the 200 mob pool. And I was relatively surprised and thought that this should be pretty easy from here since I already knew how to do this part. And the first major change that I made was, instead of wasting my time stopping to frostbolt this pack, I would instead use an iron grenade since I can continue running whilst using them. The other change that I made was, instead of frostbolting this pack of worms, I instead face pulled them, then counterspell the far pack and blink back to where the path goes. Now, this seemed to work pretty well up until I get silenced, which means no more blink, no more frost nova, and no more cone of cold, which obviously killed me. Now my second try, I started out by doing all of the same stuff I did before. I for some reason wasted my time using a blizzard here again, but somehow get past the mobs unscathed. I once again make it back to where I face pull and then counterspell, but this time it worked out a lot better since I did manage to make distance between myself and the mobs. We even managed to get some pretty nice grouping at this part. And then it was just a case of doing the exact same as I did during the 200 mob pool. I made it past all the slimes and into Vile Tongue's seat, where I sadly died due to the mobs being far too close to me. And you know, it was getting late now, so I decided to call it, and I would try again another time. Logging on, I was prepared and ready. I made sure to study the video as much as I possibly could, and I even set my Hearthstone in Desolate to make it easier for getting in and out when I needed to repair my gear. I then made my way into Maraudon and began my first pull of the day, and apparently I learned to actually counterspell here and not Blizzard. Now this run was actually going extremely well. I even learned to add a Blizzard here in order to pull the slimes up top. We even make it into Vile Tongue's seat without dying, where we pull all of these packs around here and jump across this gap. And that gives us a little moment to bandage before we start some more grouping. I of course skipped that little room in order to avoid immediate death. Now as we get into this final area here, I changed up how I was doing it. I instead pull as many trees as I can down below before making my way into the purple entrance room. I of course loop around up top, and we actually get a lot of time here for some more grouping, instead of just immediately dropping down. Once done that, we then run back through to the other room to start the loop, where we run up to the end and we apply mage armor and dampen magic before making my way back to purple room to start the kill phase. Now unfortunately, the mobs were still too far apart, and it caused me to miss the very first jump, which resulted in my death. For my second run of the day, it actually started off pretty well, up until this part where the mobs somehow caught up to me and one-shot me. Run 3 also started off extremely well. We got all the way up to the part where we loop around and group, but someone tell me what happened here. I just straight up teleported across the room. Didn't use blink either. All I did was drop down and apply ice barrier. Then off I go to the other side of the room. Was it a mob ability? Please, someone explain to me what happened. What did I do wrong? I'm so confused. Run 4, I unfortunately got stunned by one of these cavern lurkers, which killed me. Run 5, I actually do get all the way to the kill phase. My blizzards are all hitting, slowing the mobs together, AoEing them down. We were resisting basically everything the imps were sending my way, and it really looked like this was going to be the successful run. But I let the Dimetrodons get too close, which obviously caused me to get silenced. Now, I thought that I was going to be able to just wait it out by juggling the mobs back and forth. That was until I missed the jump. So I thought I could just loop around again, but because all of the mobs were low health, they were walking slower than normal, which means I met up with them before making it all the way back through. Run 6, they got too close again, but on run 8, we make it all the way to the kill phase. I place my blizzards correctly, keeping all the mobs slowed at all times, and I don't miss the jump again, and we managed to do it. Now, it wasn't quite 300 mobs, so clearly I missed some mobs along the way, but a few more hours of practicing, I did manage to get the kill count all the way up to 300 and even 320. Now, it's hard for me to say that I've mastered this farm, and I'm actually even now still practicing before I'm confident enough to start charging for the boost. But you know, I'm not that good of a player, and back when we were doing the 200 mob pool, I really wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do it at all. But due to the preparation and hard work that I put in over the past little while, I think I'm happy to say that I finished being able to do what I set out to do, and I'm very happy with the results so far. If you watched the video the full way through, then please let me know in the comments, because you are a real one. We have had a crazy journey together so far. Like I said in the intro, we are getting kind of close to 5,000 subscribers, which is insane because we only hit 1,000 a few months ago. And I'm just really glad that people seem to enjoy my videos because I really do like making them. And World of Warcraft has very quickly became one of my favorite games. You know, before I was always playing the competitive games. I was top 500 in Apex Legends and I was sweating on Rust, etc, etc. But it's nice to just chill out and level a character whilst picking flowers or something. I guess what I'm trying to say is thank you. And I will continue to make videos so long as you continue to enjoy them. Anyway, if you're interested in seeing more content, then I'm actually currently leveling a druid, which has been crazy fun so far. So I hope to see you over there as well. Okay, I think I've yapped long enough. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all later.